Hello and good morning, everybody. It's great to see you all here this morning. Obviously, people are coming on as we speak. It's all very live, which is great. And a real pleasure to see you all here this morning. Thank you for taking the time to join with us. Just giving it another couple of seconds and then we're good to go. Excellent. Okay. Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining with us for this exclusive Business Alliance presentation from Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. This roundtable event is especially timely given all manner of labour market dislocation happening right across the UK and indeed beyond UK borders at this time. Traditional labour market developments have combined with the ongoing global pandemic and more recently Brexit to create new challenges and opportunities for the talent management professionals of 2021. It gives me great pleasure to advise that today's event lead sponsors are long-standing Business Alliance members Blake Morgan and Page Group. We are especially delighted to extend a warm Thames Valley Chamber welcome to our invited special guests. Chairperson today is Blake Morgan's partner specialising in employment law, Rajiv Josh. Good morning, Rajiv. Rajiv will be joined on the guest panel by Page Group's Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Sherry Hughes, and Blake Morgan's Senior HR Consultant, David Miles. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
Special thanks also to our Chamber President, Mr. Bill Gornall-King, and CEO, Mr. Paul Britton, who are in attendance here today also.
Good morning.
Thank you, gentlemen. We are in great company here today, of course, ladies and gentlemen, with representatives drawn from cross-sector to include, but not limited to, our many friends in the fields of education, industry, policing, medical care, pastoral care and sport, to name a few of the disciplines. Charitable trusts and agri-tech and the sciences are also represented. We're very excited that some of the region's largest employers have their key personnel join with us this morning. And given the calibre in the room, I'm very confident we have a great demography that will lend itself brilliantly to some thought-provoking conversations around this important talent agenda faced by organisations in this brave new world of 2021. And so let's kick on. Please allow me to introduce our lead partners and guest panelist speakers to you. Blake Morgan is a UK law firm providing highly tailored legal solutions to individuals, businesses, not-for-profit and government clients. Many of Blake Morgan lawyers and practice groups are leaders in their field and highly ranked by the legal directories. These lawyers will work closely with you, combining their technical expertise, experience and commercialism to help you manage your risk and achieve your goals. With a headcount of close on 700, 100 of whom are partners, Blake Morgan have 5 offices in London, Cardiff, Reading, Oxford and Southampton, while acting as one firm collaboratively with its clients' best interests at heart. Thanks to its geographic footprint, Blake Morgan has an extensive CSR agenda with active affiliations to charitable networks across the region. Some recent awards for Blake Morgan include winner of the top honour at the Wales Legal Awards 2020, Outstanding Contribution to Ear Hunting or Probate Research 2019. 4 Blake Morgan lawyers won Lawyer of the Year in their respective fields in 2020, and they've also proudly sponsored Thames Valley Tech Awards in 2020. Our event co-lead partner is Page Group. Established in 1976 and now listed as a FTSE 250 company, Page Group employ over 6,500 people in 37 countries. Recognisable brands that will be familiar to most of us here today and feature as core Page Group brands include Michael Page, Page Personnel, Page Executive and Page Outsourcing. These brands are comprised of specialist recruitment teams operating across 25 disciplines from actuarial to technology. With a rich heritage, Page Group prides itself on its commitment to the professional success of its clients, candidates and employees. And recent awards include Best National Online Recruitment Agency 2020, Top 50 Inclusive Company status, plus a very impressive, incredible achievement as the only third company to reach gold status as the Gold Award by Clear Assured. Diversity Inclusion is such an integral part of the company's culture that, as well as focusing inwardly on all its employees, PageGroup also mirror the same inclusive behaviours and values when it comes to its outsourced service delivery. I would like to introduce you to our keynote speakers, Sherry Hughes, Rajiv Joshi, and David Miles. And I would like to draw your attention to the format for this morning's event. The next activity coming up very shortly is to move everyone to 3 virtual breakout rooms. There's no action required on your part, but you are going to find yourselves in a virtual room setting, and you will be divided into 3 groups, moving each delegate into the virtual breakout room. In this room, you will be joined by one of our 3 guest panelists, whom I've just introduced to you. The panelists will share a conversation about today's subject matter. This will run for a strict 15 minutes, after which participants will automatically be brought back to the main virtual auditorium and hand over back to main chair Rajiv Josh for a follow-on conversation with each of the panelists. This in turn will be followed by an open floor Q&A before we draw proceedings to a close at approximately 15 minutes past the hour. Couple of points of order, if I can, please. There will be plenty of time to contribute and ask questions throughout today. Today's programme has been designed specifically with interaction as a key priority. To facilitate the highest quality of interaction and warmly recognise the live nature of the event, a number of aspects have been amplified for your convenience. Chatham House rules will apply to the breakout session. It will not be recorded. The main panel discussion and subsequent Q&A will be recorded and posted to Thames Valley Chamber's online webinar library in the coming days for your retrieval, should you so wish. Comments by any person in the breakout session are fully non-attributable to any person. We invite and indeed actively encourage those in attendance to please lean in fully and freely to that discussion that will get underway almost immediately. Throughout this event, including now, you're invited to populate the chat function with event-specific content. This chat function is being monitored, where possible questions will be attended to here today. Where general themes emerge, we will group the questions for efficiency in the panel discussion. And if questions are not attended to in entirety, please be assured that all questions will be in follow-up activity. We invite you to also take a moment to connect and share contact details to fellow delegates on that chat box. So without further ado, can I invite my colleague Sarah to allocate us all to virtual rooms?
Thank you very much, Adrian. Good morning, everyone. In a couple of seconds' time, you will have a pop-up on your screen inviting you to a breakout room. Please accept this room invitation, and I will see you all in about 15 minutes. Enjoy the discussion. Wonderful. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your discussion. Welcome back. Everyone's coming back. And that's everyone back. So I will hand you over to our chair for the panel discussion and Q&A.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, welcome to all of you to today's session. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Just if Adrian, you can nod your head, that's clear. Oh, good. I can see Bruce doing the same. Thank you. Just to recap, really, the session today is going to talk about talent and talent management in a wider sense, and as you all know, it's there's 3 elements, if you like, to managing your talent: attracting it, and then engaging and retaining that talent. Now, employers have had to contend with an awful lot in terms of talent management in the last year, but actually even before that, before we even talk about Brexit or the pandemic, adding in to those challenges, there is what I like to describe as the changing face of the modern workforce, and that's been an expectation that constantly is changing with the groups of people that are joining as talent within any employer organization, and employers have had to keep on top of that constantly. So we add to that what people knew was coming around the corner with Brexit and the impact that might have around talent management, and then the pandemic that no one could foresee, and the way in which we've in many organizations had to work and adapt in terms of our talent management strategies in the last year, means there's an awful lot to talk about in terms of how best to look at attracting, retaining and engaging now in 2021, as we sit here today. The breakout sessions that you were in, hopefully you heard some feedback from various different organizations, experiences of that in the last year or so. Certainly the room I was in, it was quite nice to have heard some positive feedback as well around the experiences around the way in which communications within organizations have improved since the pandemic, certainly, but also the way in which we are changing and adapting the way talent is inducted into an organization so that it understands the brand or the culture, whatever you want to describe it, of what that organization believes it has, because that's no longer the way in which it perhaps was as easy to achieve, and it never has been easy, but easier to achieve before the pandemic, where people learn through osmosis by being in the same places at the same times. Right, without further ado, Adrian did obviously introduce our two panelists, Sherry and David, and I'm delighted to be joined by both of them. Sherry obviously comes from Page Group and has all of that wealth of experience as a recruiter, but also with her diversity and inclusion hat on, of which she knows an awful lot about. And David, a very experienced HR director level person who's been in HR for many, many years and now works with us at Blake Morgan as a consultant. So delighted, David and Sherry, hopefully you're still there. I can't see your faces on the screen I have at the moment, but I'm sure you are there. And I can see you both. There we are, David, I can see you. I'll kick off with the first question then. And perhaps Sherry, if I can start with you, if that's okay. As a recruiter, you Page Group, you'll know a lot about this. What have been the main changes, I guess, that you could say you've noticed in relation to the recruitment process itself over the last few years, perhaps say compared to many years ago? And then perhaps David, I'll come to you after Sherry as well on that point.
Yeah, sure. I think, when it comes to a process, more than ever, people want to have true transparency of an organisation. I think the days have gone a little bit where it's all just about impressing the organisation. It's very much about impressing on the candidate as well, the type of organisation you are, what you believe. And some of this came up in our breakout room, actually, around the experience when it comes to attracting and retaining people at the moment is because we've had to shift so much because of the pandemic. Everybody's learning on their feet. So actually, how quick are you as an organisation to evolve? So that is in your recruitment practices, and around your engagement of people and so on. I mean, there's not surprisingly, there's a lot around remote working, the gloom of working at home versus how do you manage this hybrid working going forward, because some people are just thinking they'll click back into everyone being in the office. So, it's real transparency over what a role would be now in a pandemic, but also what the future would look like at that organisation as well. So I think, everybody probably needs to be way more open than they've ever been. And I think candidates are asking different questions now. They want to know different things about a prospective employer. So employers need to be much more almost vulnerable in a way and, be really, really candid about their strategy, their aspirations, their goals and so on. Ethics, come through an awful lot. So.
Yeah, thank you. David, any thoughts on that? And perhaps, I don't know, we're seeing more use of technology, I suspect. You'll say as well on that?
Oh, a massive increase in technology, but I think many of us have probably gone through three years worth of technology growth in probably 3 months, and that's continued to grow during the pandemic. I think one of the big things that technology has done for us is to open up the information on companies. It is now so easy for an applicant to find out about an employer, and also to get in touch or find views from employees or ex-employees of the employer. And I think a number of us are faced with a bit like the TripAdvisor reviews, where if you run a bed and breakfast and someone damages you with a review, it's very difficult to remove it. We have the same challenge, whether we're in the legal, where lawyers have it with Roll on Friday. Many employers will have Glassdoor, and it's the negatives that stick with people. And often, I think, from a recruitment point of view, there's not necessarily a big enough presence from HR and recruitment on companies' own websites and on companies' own communications. We don't necessarily sell the brand as an employer because we're so busy on those websites selling the brand to our customer, whether the customer is another business or consumers. So I think that's a massive challenge. And there are innovations happening all the time. Just in the breakout room today, a new hotel created a brand new process of auditioning online with 20 people online, recruiting 20 people. And it wasn't a replication of a traditional process, it was a new process. And I think that's a challenge for all of us that have grappled with technology over the years. There's one approach is to replicate what we've always done. The other one is to say, jettison all of that and do something completely differently.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'd agree with both of you on those points. And certainly, what I'm hearing people saying from clients of ours, organisations who are employers, are saying that candidates more now want to see as early part of that process the peers that they'll be working with, the individuals that they will be working alongside and their colleagues, not just the hiring managers and or perhaps someone from recruitment within the business, but the actual real people behind the scenes, if I can describe it that way. They want to understand that. They want to understand what they'll get when they join a business, and that's even more challenging, I guess, in the current climate where people can't go and do a walk around, for example, as easily if they are restricted from doing that. Just on your point about spending time on selling that identity, if you like, to your candidates. One of my clients described it quite well, I thought, which is that candidates should be treated like customers, and they should really be informed and treated in that way so that an employer is actually selling to them, because competition out there is stiff for the best talent, and you want to make sure that you can put yourselves in the best position to attract it, for sure.
Yeah, just a follow-on point, if I can, about this image and the creation, is that one very large organisation I know makes a great play about its diversity pitch when it's in recruitment mode. But if you go onto its website and access its thought leadership webinars, they are all panels of people that look like me, or perhaps even slightly younger, because most people are younger than me, but they're all white male of a certain age. And it is just such a disconnect with the message that they're putting across in the recruitment package.
That's right. It's got to be consistent, hasn't it? Because that'll move straight into that engagement retention piece, isn't it? Because yes, you can sell what you like to someone before they join you, and then they do join you, but you've almost got to walk that walk afterwards. Otherwise, sure they'll leave at some point if they're not happy with what they're with. Talking about the remoteness of the way recruitment processes are working, and again, there's been a move to that even before we saw or even heard about COVID, because that the AI, the artificial intelligence of the earlier parts of recruitment and sifting was starting to be used, and that, as we all know, is a time saver. It's a cost saver for many organizations, and gone are those times where people were sifting through thousands and thousands of applications as human element involvement. But there must be some, I guess, downsides to that technology being used, I guess, and can you think of any, and how to maybe perhaps mitigate against that, if there is?
Shall I go first, Sherry?
Open to you, Dorothy, yeah.
I mean, clearly there's I think the legal point, Rajiv, which is more your game than me, but around there are big pitfalls in AI recruitment processes that ill thought out, badly reviewed, can land organizations in big trouble. There's also the misuse of psychometric processes by you in the same automated process. And I think nothing changes, but from a selection point of view, you should use the right tool for the right process and not use whitewash across the whole process. So I think there are big downsides in that. I think there is an accessibility point, and just picking up a bank, publicly, Lloyds Bank, recently advertised that everyone who applies must have access to a secure broadband, be able to work free of interference from animals and children. That to me is so exclusive, and is putting barriers in front of people from applying, let alone taking part in the workplace. So I think be very careful, organisations, about the process, because are you really going to enable people to apply? And don't you want to attract more people?
Good point, and that leads nicely to diversity and inclusion as an area, because of some of the issues you just raised there, David. And Sherry, your thoughts on that, because how does an organisation ensure it's meeting its diversity objectives, if you like, in the way it manages that recruitment process?
I think straight away you've got to think about the skills you're assessing, and I'm just going to go down. Sorry, what was that about being free of children? Sorry.
That was the bank, wasn't it? The bank job ad there.
So I think the important thing is think about the skills you're assessing, because there are different ways of assessing the same skills, and you need to be able to assess people differently based on themselves and the certain environment or techniques that they might need to be able to thrive, so that you can assess the same skills. A simple way of explaining it, you know, there's a brilliant cartoon which is all about, you've got a snake, a monkey and a rhino, and you can't ask them all to climb a tree and determine whether or not they are competent at doing a job. You can't ask everybody to do everything in the same way and assess them for the same skill. And this is very, very specific when it comes to neurodiversity. You know, their strengths are simply very different to somebody who's neurotypical. And I think the second organisations get on board with that and don't just use the same process for everybody, for everything, then actually you will really start to be able to spot strengths much more easily. There was a seminar I went to when we were allowed to do things in person, and there's an autistic chap, and he said, you know, the interview is just the worst thing in the world for me, but, you know, let me build you an intranet and, you know, I'm in my element. And I think we all need to start to think a little bit more creatively about flexible interview processes, because it gives greater accessibility to a much wider pool of candidates. But if we need to, as the employer, we need to think first and foremost about what is the skill we want to assess, because you can't go the other way, which I have heard of an organisation doing, which I will not name, but they are so keen to recruit more disabled talent, both physical and neurodiverse, that they've almost completely removed any form of assessment. And they've gone, right, we'll just bring the talent in, we'll sell the organisation to them, and then we'll find a job for them. And I just said, but you're not assessing their capability to actually do the job. So you're setting the whole process up to fail, because firstly, a disabled candidate doesn't want to be treated specially to say, oh, well, you'll just get the job because you've got a disability. They want to prove themselves as much as the next person, be recruited on merit, and, you know, do a job based on their ability to do the job. And what will happen is, if you were to do it kind of the other way around, of course it all falls down, because people either aren't doing jobs they're skilled to do, or they're not doing jobs they want to do. And suddenly then people can dismiss it as, oh, well, we tried that and it didn't work. So everybody needs to think very carefully about their infrastructure to set everybody up to win and to succeed. So how do you create the right environment to support any candidate to be the best version of themselves in an interview, or in an assessment, or in a, you know, whatever it is? And I think once we start to do that, it completely opens the world to diversity, because that candidate knows that they are going to be given every chance to really demonstrate what they can do.
Yeah, really good point, Sherry. I completely agree with that as well. Yes, there's an obligation to make adjustments for employees who have disabilities, but there's got to be a level of capability to perform the role with those adjustments. And if there isn't, then we're looking at a retention issue, because they'll either be moved out or they'll leave. And that's the other side of the problem. And before we come on to engagement and retention, I wanted to talk about talent pools, because What we have seen is, again, depending on the sector and the environment your organization is in, but certainly in our world and many other organizations have started seeing the opening of eyes, I guess, from the leaders of those organizations on the way that people are able to work effectively and not have to be in the office every day, 5 days of a week, for example, and can work effectively partly in a hybrid blended way, in and out, or even completely virtually if necessary, depending on the job. Knowing that, and knowing that that may well be the model that many will engage with going forward as organizations, there is an opportunity, isn't there, on the talent pool and how wide that talent pool may be for people as employers to source from. Are you seeing that already, perhaps say at Page Group, for example, from your experience there, and certainly any thoughts and comments on that, both of you, David and Sherry, on that?
I think it should be. I think it should be a way to widen talent pools now that we can all work remotely. And particularly when we are thinking about the disabled talent pool, I think the problem is a lot of clients aren't there yet and they don't recognise it, because this came up in our breakout group a little bit about, you know, actually, yeah, but we'll still go back to being an office culture when we come back. And when you start to think about the disabled community, they have been quite hardly affected by COVID. They've been one of the groups that actually have found themselves out of work and so on. And whilst actually this environment should be conducive to getting more of them into work, it isn't necessarily working that way, because some organisations, and I do mean some, are thinking about, well, it's just not going to work when we're all back in an office. And well, that's not the case. You know, actually, if you can, so back to the point I made, if you're saying, how can I create an environment that optimises your ability to perform? Well, then why can't you just maintain that working environment? Even if people do go back into the office or whatever, you do just have to think about how you accommodate. And one thing certainly that we're looking at is that there will be an office you can go to. You know, it might, you know, let's say some of our older offices where perhaps we are still tied into a lease and perhaps their accessibility isn't great. So they might not be able to go to that office, but actually there's another one 30 miles away that they can do if they want to go in on whatever frequency, you know, that we have got a solution. I mean, that's perhaps more specifically for people with mobility issues and so on. But, you know, I think it should be, and people should embrace it. They should embrace that actually this remote working does open up so many more avenues when it comes to a talent pool. We know that there's a double-edged sword to it, and one of the people in our room said that about, you know, the challenge of well-being and the gloom, as they referred to it, you know, remote working. We know there's a much bigger kind of picture here, but yeah, people should be embracing this as opening up a talent pool for sure.
And aside from the talent pool vis-a-vis diversity, as you mentioned rightly, Sherry, there's a geographical barrier, isn't there? That's we're losing. David, you know, this opens up the whole market, doesn't it?
Well, I think so. But I mean, I think before the pandemic, about 8%, I think, of the workforce worked the majority of their time remotely. And certainly hearing in the breakout room today, and most of the stuff I hear from talking to clients is that percentage is going to increase, but it's not going to increase to become the majority. I think that the majority model going forward for progressive employers, certainly, and for employers that want to maintain a place in the labour market, because it is a competitive market, will be some form of hybrid. And then that says, well, okay, I can now recruit. I'm based in Reading. I can now recruit someone who's really talented and they live in Edinburgh. That's great for when they're remote working. But when I want to be creative, when I want to be social, am I prepared to pay the cost, or are they prepared to pay the cost of doing the commute? So whilst there's no need to pay the commute 5 days a week, when you want to do it, how does that work? Certainly in the breakout room, someone must have been looking at my slides, because they've actually done what I thought organizations might want to do, which was close a lot of offices, a large number of offices, and have enabled, through a deal with an office provider, you can probably guess who that is, where people can access that when they need to get into an office environment and meet with clients and meet with each other locally. But that doesn't necessarily bring everyone together. So I think there are big challenges because we can do that remote working. We touched on in a previous seminar with one of my colleagues speaking, William, around, well, this opens up the opportunity for remote working from anywhere in the world. Of course, there are significant issues around around income tax, social security taxation, business rules by doing that. But there's absolutely no reason not to do that. And of course, we have clients, and there are people on the breakout room today, on the seminar today, who are already communicating with their offices around the world. So they're working remotely already. It's how we balance that bringing together. Logic to me says that tight geographic is going to be limited. One of the things that just wanted to touch on that as a tangent from the breakout, it was mentioned by a couple of people in the breakout rooms, was we haven't got a single type of workforce. And Sherry was making the point about tailoring things. There are people who cannot work from home because the work has to be done somewhere else. And when we're designing models, when we're designing organization cultures, I think we have to be conscious that we don't develop a two-tier workforce. That's as a country, but also within organizations, that we need to develop a way of working that accommodates the needs of the business, balances the organizational needs versus the individual needs.
I think that's a really important point, David, you make, because there will be, as much as there's hybrid or blended working, there's hybrid workforces within an organization sometimes, and you will have those who have to go in and those who don't. And you just need to make sure that there's a level of consistency, again, from the employee engagement perspective, that no one group feels as if they've been left out, if you like, from within it. It's interesting as well what you say about the opportunities around the talent pool and recruiting from a wider group, because there is that other side to that opportunity, and that is ensuring that you do deal with the legals and tax issues, for example, if someone's working overseas, certainly, but even from another part of the UK, how do we manage that one day a month that we do want them to come in from what may be a very far place from where the office site is. No session would be a session without mentioning Brexit, I guess. And one thing I wanted to just add to this is on the talent pool and attraction piece is, obviously we all know what happened January the 1st, and we now no longer have free movement of labour from within the EU, from the EU into the UK. Yes, EU nationals have joined and still can join the EU settlement scheme if they are here already, but certainly now recruiting talent to come and work here for certain very specialist roles where the talent isn't available in the UK opens up the rest of the world to this, because previously where I know of one client, they would look to the EU if they couldn't find that talent here to bring someone to reside here because it was easier to do so. We'll now be able to look anywhere where the best talent sits, whether that's Australia, Philippines, South Africa, or wherever else in the world, because the same hoops will have to be jumped through to get those work permits for those individuals as it would be for someone from Germany, for example, now. So it does open up, I guess, where they'll look and possibly look at where the best talent actually is. Wanted to move on to the next section of this, if I can, which is on engagement and retention of talent. So you've done all of the things, the great points you guys have made around trying to ensure talent attraction is kept optimal. Once you have that talent, how do you keep it, and how are we seeing that expectations and what people want has changed over time? David, I'll come to you first, because I'm thinking of learning and development here in particular. How does that fit in? Because I often hear business leaders, or some business leaders, say, well, learning and development doesn't align with our business strategy. Profitability and this is just an add-on and a cost. Yeah,
well, I think that's a wider point in a sense, Rajiv, because of that very few organizations have really captured human capital metrics. I think those HR leaders that have managed to do that and to get organizations to measure have been able to demonstrate the return on invested talent. So it's looking at your EBIT, EBITDA figures, plus your employee costs, plus associated costs, and looking at what your input costs are, and then demonstrating the return on that. I think in terms of L&D, what has been demonstrated during the pandemic is that, and this is an example, we're all able to join this from the comfort of our homes. I don't have to drive from the South Coast to Reading and hang around. It's learning and development has become far more productive because of through the use of technology. I think it's also, it's more readily measurable in terms of the inputs and how people are using it. I think a real challenge for L&D is on softer skills. And I'm sure there are people able to deliver soft skills training via a remote platform. But it seems to me that it really does lend itself to face-to-face activity. And the other thing that you don't get in the remote arena is the over the coffee break chat. And I'm sure we've all been on courses and conferences where actually the most important thing we got out of it was nothing to do with the main speakers. It was the chat with other people. So I think those are the key points, I think, in terms of L&D. And it should be easier to leverage L&D technology spend on the back of the pandemic, because everyone in the organization has been exposed to the use of technology. Whereas previously you might not have been able to get the budget. I think now you ought to be able to. Great,
thank you. And it's about really, I guess, translating the benefits of learning and development through datafication of information that you get as HR to those business leaders to understand that actually it works towards the bottom line, because we're losing good talent perhaps if those people don't feel they're being developed or are progressing, I guess, within the organization.
Yeah, I think it's that return on investment point, Rajiv. I think that traditionally HR has we've measured ourselves in terms of inputs, numbers that have been put through, or in terms of relatively old-fashioned labor turnover, those sorts of figures, rather than return on investment. And that's where we ought to be moving.
Great. And then I guess around the same theme, but for diversity and inclusion, Sherry, we've seen thousands of research papers and things around the world about how successful organizations are very diverse in their makeup. How's that an issue with retaining people and engaging your existing workforce? How do you best manage that to keep your talent, and also how do you convince those who maybe not so convinced about the benefits of it?
Well, I think the problem is too many people still think it's a moral issue, and actually they don't recognise that it has enormous commercial gain to have a diverse business. So that's the first thing. There is a very strong business case for diversity. It's not just the right thing to do. Secondly, Deloitte did a brilliant report, I think it was actually 2019 now, all on millennials. And bearing in mind they are a significant part of our workforce and will only continue to grow in regards to percentage of our workforce, it is a really high agenda point for them when they choose an employer. So it's partly around, so thinking about the L&D thing, they want to be continually developed. They want to know personally and professionally they are always going to be developed by an organisation. So that's a really key point for them. Secondly, they want to know they're working for a diverse organisation. Thirdly, they want to know that the organisation is more than just profit, that actually they are doing way more from an ethics perspective, sustainability, you name it. There is the drivers now for millennials and Gen Z are different. First, it's not necessarily a job for life anymore. That's not so much of a draw. And yes, okay, pay is always going to be a part of it, but pay and benefits actually is much lower down the list than it ever used to be. So we need, and you can't ignore that. When that is going to be the highest percentage of your workforce, and there was certainly somebody on our breakout who does have a high percentage of a younger workforce, that is what they're looking for. And if you want to hold on to them, you've got to listen. So diversity becomes much higher up. It's a commercial win anyway. And I think we've launched a shadow board in 2020, and the brilliant cognitive diversity that comes into the room off the back of that has just blown me away. I knew it would, because I knew it should, but until you actually see it and hear it, it has been really remarkable. So, you know, bring diversity into the room, bring different perspectives, and suddenly you'll realise that the richness is just, you know, so powerful. Nobody can ignore it. Even the unbelievers, or whatever they're called. But you know, everyone.
That's right.
Gets swept up in
The
it.
non-believers, yeah, absolutely. And I think those are really powerful points, because actually there's an expectation now, and it's not just generational. I think it's changed in those older workers as well within organisations in recent times around fairness. Does a business align with their personal values? And it's more than just I'd like to describe this title creep. There was a time where you would just add the word senior to someone to keep them in an organization a little bit longer, but they'd get nothing more than that. So title creep and perhaps even salary creep to keep them there, but they're deeply not happy with the way things are fundamentally within a business. They're more likely to leave now, and diversity feeds into that. You know, is there a gender pay gap in an organization? Even if you're not a woman, it may matter deeply to you as to whether you think that organization is a just and a fair one for you to remain in a longer term. And that applies across all diversity strands, I guess, and what people want. They want to know about environmental sustainability, and they want to understand that that is something that's important to their employer, just as it is to them. We're seeing much more of that being central to the agenda and the minds of people that work within an organization. I'm conscious of time, and I know we're going to roll into a bit of time, because I've seen some questions in there which I'd like to leave us time to look at and answer. I just wanted to mention two more points. One is on that talent pool extension, if you like, which we described as possibly as an opportunity when you look at the ability to perhaps recruit wider than the geography of your location, if people are working in a more remote way. It's also a threat, of course, because that very same talent that you have may see opportunities elsewhere. And I know where we are based, in particular in the Thames Valley, we've always had London down the road there, where people may end up leaving because of a higher salary, for example. But we've had many who perhaps may not want to do that because of the commute, albeit not a very long one, but still a commute that may not be attractive to some. That may well be out of the equation in some types of work where they only have to go once a week, maybe perhaps to that higher paid job down the road. And so engagement and looking at all of those key points that we talked about, learning development and diversity, is so much more important to keep the people that you value. And flexibility, I'm just going to mention that because I know there'll be a higher expectation of the ability to work in a more flexible way. It'll be more difficult for those employers who perhaps have had to work in that way and have had people who can demonstrate it works, to then refuse requests to work in a more flexible way when the pandemic is over. So that'll be a little bit of a tricky issue that I think we need to grapple with in keeping our people who have different expectations around where they will work when this is all over.
I think it's more than just where they will work as well, Rajiv. I think one of the other things that's come through the pandemic is people have adapted their working hours and times because they're working remotely. And the CIPD have just launched a campaign for flexible working as a right from day one. And I think the pressure is just going to build. We've talked about the physical, but I think there's also just the time dimension.
That's right.
If I'm working on a report, does it matter when I do it? If I've got to do this, then clearly I need to be working now. Yeah, so there's that hybrid approach, I think, to working times.
Agreed. Yeah, really good points there. Thank you both. I'm just scrolling down some of these questions, and by all means, David and Sherry, feel free to pick any that you see that you think from the chat room you'd like to answer. But we had really interesting comment there from someone in the agrochemical industry who says, they're actually employing people in other countries rather than saying they've got to be based in Bracknell. Which really has opened up their pool, and also from a diversity perspective, I think that's a really, really good point to make.
I think there's some really interesting points being raised in the chat room around mental health champions and EAP. And I know, for example, that Blake Morgan has both of those. And given if people are working at a distance, then the concept of mental health champions, I think, does take on a whole new dimension, as opposed to just being the mental health champion in the Reading office, for example, Rajiv. So I think there's some massive work there, and there's been a real focus, and I think quite rightly, from the pandemic, about employers thinking about the mental health and the well-being of employees in a way that perhaps some didn't before the pandemic.
Yeah, good point. Here's a question, maybe one for you, Sherry, possibly. Beyond assessing talent skills and or adequacy for a role, how can we as employers best sell our company purpose to attract candidates and evidence to potential talented candidates that we walk the talk of our values?
Yeah, I mean, it's as David was saying before, people actually ignore that part sometimes. They just assume people will think the best of an organisation, but that's not the case. My view is be really overt with what you stand for, because as a candidate, the default is that either you're not ethical, you're not, you know, into diversity and inclusion, you don't have a culture of belonging. So the point is, because for so many businesses it has been that for so long, that's the default for any candidate. So you have to put it front and centre. You have to be very, very clear that, one, you care, you have a strategy, you're implementing it. You know, it is worth getting involved in benchmarks and accreditations, and because it's not just about the visibility, it's also about bettering yourself. It is about getting that constant feedback about changes you need to make within the culture. It's strategic changes, it's mindset changes, it's behavioural changes, it's all sorts. So but you have to do that. I mean, people ask me a lot about adverts and they say, how do I track diversity? Well, put in your advert you care about diversity, and maybe mention some of the things you've done, because straight away then it's right being, you know, hit between the eyes of any prospective candidate that actually you are a Race at Work signatory, or you are signed up to the Reading Ethical Recruitment Charter, or, you know, whatever it is, that there is just something that you can really put your name to say, we are really trying. We might be at the beginning stages, but we are really trying. We want to get better, and therefore we are taking advice and feedback and making changes wherever possible. So make sure your website is reflective of that. Be really overt about it in anything that goes external, so marketing brochures, you know, job adverts, job descriptions. You know, think about your language, think about who you're representing, think about your commitment to something, and say it.
Yeah, I think walking that walk is it's easy to say you do it, but you have to, as you say, carry out those actions, and it's who you collaborate with, whether that's organizations like Ethical Reading and many others, where you are showing that you're paying more than just lip service to those things that you say to candidates before they join you, that you do as an organization. There's a really interesting point that's been made here in the chat room about employee advocacy, because the power of social media is huge, and it's not just what your own people say about you, it's what your customers and your suppliers and the third-party organizations you collaborate with say about you. And it's about the perceptions that everyone else has about all of that information, of which David and you've said earlier, there is so much available to. So if you're a job candidate looking to consider an organization, who are they? Do they meet my values? What does social media say about it? What do these salary surveys say about it? Now more than ever, you can understand what the people who work there think about their organization than you may have been in the past able to find out, because of social media. And people are much more open to expressing their dissatisfaction about their employer on social media these days than they were in the past. And so a disgruntled employee will put something out there for everyone else to see, whether that's via a survey or whether it's via their own social media feed.
As an ex-retailer, we always used to say, if you manage a complaint well, you will get far more coverage than just delivering good service. So if you can manage a disgruntled employee, if you can deal with that cause, then that will spread like wildfire, because they will tell other people the good news. I think the gender pay is a good example of what we just been talking about, Rishi. At the very base level, an organisation has to report their gender pay gap. And some organisations just do that. Organisations at the other end of the spectrum are actually embracing that information. They're sharing it, they're talking about it, and they're discussing with their employees and drawing up action plans how they're going to address if there is an issue. And I think it's a sort of a nice little snapshot of it. If you measure it, you've got a chance of managing it, and you then need to talk about it, and you need to listen as well, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. Another theme that I'm seeing going here, and perhaps this is the last one we'll look at for purposes of time, is around boundaries and home working, and needing to be careful around that flexibility, because we've all seen that sort of back-to-back Zoom calls, as someone there describes as well, being put into people's diaries, and the expectation that people are going to be available at any time just because they're there and they don't have a commute, and they don't, they should be able to just deal with things now, and at whatever time it's required. We do need to be careful about that, don't we, David?
Yeah, I think
from
that's
a mental
right.
health perspective, if nothing else.
And sometimes it's well-meaning and well-intentioned, and it blows up badly. So the manager who thinks it's a great idea to check in on their individual member of staff every day can be seen as a micromanager. And it's a bit like you deciding to get up from your desk when you're back in the office, Rajiv, and go and talk to people. You're doing it when you choose to do it, not when they want to receive you. And I think it's just, in an office, it's easier to say, sorry, Rajiv, I'm busy. Sorry, but can you come back? And you go, oh, that's fine.
Or you can see they're busy just
you
because
can see they're busy.
Of what they're doing.
Yeah. You can't do that with the technology. You can't see that. So I think we just need to be conscious of that. I noticed that Vodafone were talking about how they're adapting. And one of the things they've done is they've just said, we're not going to have meetings of over 30 minutes. The standard 30-minute appointment slot in the diary calendar technology has been removed, and it's now replaced by 20-minute slots. And I thought that was really interesting. That's just a cute way of dealing with these things. And actually our technology slot is 30 minutes. And you think, well, maybe we ought to look at that. And it's just, there could be some simple things. Yeah, I think some of us are all in danger with I've got 2 phones and a couple of laptops sat on this desk. And yeah, it's quite easy to do it all day long and all night long. And we've got to be self-disciplined, but organizations, I think, have got to become more helpful at preventing those interventions. Yeah,
thank you. And I think that's a really important point, and made by delegates as well here. For the interest of time and keeping to the agenda, I know we were allowed a little bit of flex for this session by Adrian very generously, but I think we're sort of pushing that now. So we'll probably need to move on to handing back to him. But before I do that, as we mentioned, we will follow up with any questions that we may not have been able to answer after this. So please accept our apologies for not having the ability to go back to everyone on any questions that you might have asked. And 2 very quick points, if I may, as takeaways. Sherry and David, could I ask you on, if anything, 2 points, a sentence each, please, on today's discussion that people might want to remember?
Check your culture. If you're not living and breathing it, it doesn't matter how good your attraction is.
Mine would be to compete. We are in a labour market. If we want to compete, it's no good just going back to what we did before the pandemic. And my final takeaway is, let's remember the human in human resource.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you, and back to you, Adrian.
Rajiv, thank you very much indeed. And just an optimistic tone as well. I'm actually under the flight path for Heathrow, so there may be an occasional aircraft. And the good news of that is there is economic life out there, folks. We may not have seen it for a while, but it is live, it's happening, and it's in the air every 2 minutes at the moment. So thank you to the panel for what was obviously a very lively conversation, some fantastic takeaways. If I could just, ladies and gentlemen, signpost you to a number of events that are coming down the track. We've got 3 that we would like to signpost you to firstly, and it is tomorrow, February the 11th at 10:30, there will be a webinar on EU exit and VAT implications. This is going to be led by Steve Crindle, a VAT partner at Haynes Watts. He's going to talk us through these changes and options available to manage VAT arrangements and liabilities. There will be a Q&A on the day also. Event 2 with KPMG and Youth Adventure is a business leaders event. It's the first of 2021. And as you can see on the title, there is a clue here. It's charity partnerships, good for business, good for people. Under discussion will be corporate social responsibility and its role in business, which was referenced, I think, in the previous discussion also. And that's on February the 17th at 10:30. Event 3 is on February the 24th at 10 a.m. It's a webinar. It's delivered by BRICS. It's titled Making Better Business Decisions in the Most Volatile Market in History. Pretty eye-catching title. Under discussion will be how to change the way we plan for the future, foster the growth of new businesses, and ensure the survival of existing ones. Again, Q&A on the day. Full registration for these events and all events are available on www.thamesvalleychamber.co.uk. And so that leads me to my closing comments. I would like to extend gratitude to all of you who made today possible, and lots of energy in the room. Thank you for the contributions from one and all. I'd like to extend a particular big thank you to the entire production team, and of course special mention to our lead business alliance partners, Blake Morgan and Page Group. Our very own Chambers Head of Marketing, Sarah Irving, and her team, our Chambers Board under leadership of our CEO, Paul Britton. To our entire membership, and to you, dear delegates and fellow Chamber friends and guests. Final words of personal thanks to our chair today, Rajiv. Thank you very much indeed, sterling job. And of course, guest panelists in Sherry Hughes of Page Group and David Miles of Blake Morgan for their time and expertise. Completely valuable, and thank you very much indeed. Sherry, obviously you did a marvellous job in juggling homeschooling responsibilities there as well. You had our full sympathies and empathy. The Chamber look forward to developing further this conversational space and events across 2021 and beyond. Thank you all for your time here today and ongoing support of your Chamber of Commerce. A final note is that a short survey will arrive to your inbox later this morning, and we would appreciate a few moments of your time to share with us your feedback, and it will be used as support for follow-on events and communication. Finally, you've been listening to me, Adrian McMahon, Business Alliance Manager with Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce and lead on this event. Wishing everyone a collective keep safe in this time of COVID. Thank you, goodbye, and have a pleasant day and week ahead. And until the next time, do take care. Every best and goodbye. Thank you.